everyone. Welcome back to the Music Chat. We are here again to talk about great songs of history, present and way back.
Way back.
Yeah.
Way back.
And today we have a little bit of a way back one, but not too far back. We did the Reformation last week, and we had the great hymn, Mighty Fortress is Our God, and we follow that up with the celebration of All Saints' Day this coming Sunday. And we have another big, powerful hymn that we heavily associate with that called For All the Saints.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel very British this morning.
Yes.
It's very, very, very
It
British.
is. Everybody who had their hands on this was from England.
And as one person said it, if anybody knows how to write music that has pomp and circumstance,
Oh my goodness.
the British do.
Put it in the hands of the English.
Yeah, I
for
know.
Sure.
Isn't that
And
true?
This is a wonderful example of that.
Absolutely.
Although it did have a interesting journey
Yeah.
with the melody part that we'll
Absolutely.
talk about later. But we'll talk first about the gentleman who wrote the text, William Walsham Howe was his name. Very English name.
Very
isn't it?
English, yeah.
All three names there.
Who
Yeah,
lived in
18
Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
Shrewsbury.
part of London area.
Yeah.
I understand. And
Well, they said also that if you, it's North Yorkshire, so if you know the All Creatures Great and Small stories, that was the area.
okay.
So
right.
if you've ever watched that series, that's where he's from. So it's a kind of a rural area.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And he spent his life, he was grew up and was, kind of interested in hymn writing, even at age 13.
Mhm.
And he eventually did write quite a few hymns, but they all took place in the first third of his career, I'd say, when he was younger. He was ordained a bishop
Yeah.
in 1846.
Mhm.
He had a lot of capacities in that career, but he ended up, he kind of like served through the ranks. When you're young, you have a job, and then you get another job, and
Right.
so he kind of bounced around into various things and serving up the ranks there. And landed eventually in East London. He was the Bishop of Suffragan, another very English
I know.
name.
They're probably cringing as we say
Yeah.
these. Suffragan or
But
something.
he was a people's priest, and this area, this Suffragan, where he was a bishop, was a slum area where he didn't have a lot of pay, not a lot of prestige, and he was there for a decade or so, I think, and then he moved on where he ended his life. He was the Bishop of Wakefield, which was again a poor mining town where he just lived amongst the poor.
Tried to help them. Yeah.
And was offered more prestigious positions and for more pay and all that, and he
He
stayed.
turned him down.
Yeah, stayed with the people.
And he was, in fact, because of that, they have two titles for him. He's remembered as a poor man's bishop and as a children's bishop.
Yes.
So that's where his interest lies. And as I was reading about him, I kind of thought of the current pope, because
Oh yes, good parallel.
he really does seem to be that kind of person as well.
Mhm.
I mean, he's the pope, so that's a pretty big deal, but he does have a great concern for the common kind of man, and
Yeah.
I respect that a lot.
Well, I read one article, I didn't see this anywhere else except one source. A third way that he was known was the omnibus
The
priest,
omnibus,
because he took public transportation.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what made me think of it.
To go to, and I guess the custom, the other bishops, most other bishops would have ridden a private coach.
Sure.
To go out and,
Mhm.
they might visit the poverty areas, but they're gonna arrive in,
Yeah.
their own transportation.
Well, and again, I think that's what made me think of
Yeah.
this particular pope, because he's that way.
So this is a quality guy.
Yeah, quality.
Yeah, he's a
I have a
quality
lot
guy.
of respect for
Yeah,
Mr. Howe, definitely. Very British.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. He also, along the children's lines, he had a great interest in children and wrote children's hymns and published a children's hymn book, I think. So, he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He does some good things.
Yeah.
I don't think he was a musician. I don't think I saw anywhere where he had musical skills, but he did write.
He did write,
the
yeah,
lyrics
and I think
text.
he wrote like over about 60 hymns, but of course For All the Saints really is his
Yeah,
most famous
exactly.
one. Yeah.
So let's see, he would have been, I've got For All the Saints was 1864 for him, so he wasn't yet in those places. He was still sort of transit when he wrote this. So it was early part of his career, like I said.
And it was just written for All Saints Day. I mean, that's why initially he wrote it, and it kind of grew from that. But that was it. You know, as we often do, we write things that are utilitarian in a way for us, and sometimes they turn out to be pretty cool.
Well, and so when you read articles about For All the Saints, you get a lot of adjectives, and some of them were, and this is referring to the text, but it also is merged, and we'll sing a verse in a moment. It's merged with a very famous melody that we know, and that helps bring out some of these. But
Sure.
but these are words that refer to the text, not so much the melody. And I read, adjectives that said very direct, rhythmic, regal, joyful, full of strength, majestic, uplifting.
Right.
All words that we could have used last week for Mighty Fortress, but we again use them now for this hymn.
And this is, I mentioned to you, a Te Deum, which is it's a format that many composers use to write choral pieces and whatever. Excuse me. And it is a poem of praise. So in this particular one, they go back and they go back through the saints and the apostles that have brought us to this place, and they praise their lives and their lives on earth, their lives in heaven. So it is a song of praise.
Right. There was originally 11 stanzas. We normally see 8 of those stanzas.
Which is still a lot.
Yeah, that's still a lot. And usually, unfortunately, we probably don't sing all 8 stanzas.
No.
I think I've been in attendance once or twice when we did all 8.
Really?
Like maybe 4 were done at the beginning of the service, 4 were done at the end, or something like that. So sometimes they're all in there, but it's basically what the arc of the whole arc goes. It starts in heaven, and we talk about the saints in heaven who have come before, the church triumphant, and then some of the verses in the middle sort of move down to earth and come down, and we talk about the
church militant.
The church militant, our saints that are here still on earth, the apostles, the martyrs, the soldiers. Just the people trying to go through life and be of God, and so, and then in the end it goes back towards, we have those beautiful verses again looking towards heaven.
Church triumphant.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a neat arc of joining the communion of saints, so to speak.
That's right.
Yeah.
And apparently in the Anglican Church, that's a big thing to unite the church militant, the people, with the church triumphant, and of course Christ is the one that does that. So
yeah,
it's well written.
Boy, I think in all of our lives we have a little bit of that in us, because we've all had parents and relatives and people we know who have gone on, and then we're still here, and we think of them, and we think of joining them.
They give us strength,
yeah,
because we know that they have gone through tough things as well, and that it is Christ that unites us, and that it will be triumphant.
So I think it's time for you to sing
verse
verse 1 of this. So we
My name, oh,
Mr. Howe,
Mhm.
Bishop Howe. And then what happens is along comes, well, I think there was probably several little versions of it that were around in the very beginning.
Could be,
But
yeah.
the one that got well known was by this guy Barnby.
Barnby, yes, I know.
Yeah. And
it hung around
Joseph,
for a
Joseph
while.
Barnby.
Yeah.
Barnsby or Barnby?
No,
was
it's
it?
Barnby.
Barnby, yes.
Yeah.
And so let's see. Now Howe was 1823 to 1897. Wrote this in 1864.
Mhm.
So Barnby comes along, and he's an organist and a choir guy.
Right.
And
Big choir guy.
he was well connected in London. He knew Charles Gounod, you
Yep.
know, and so he got a hold of this text
Mhm.
at some point, and he wrote a tune called Sarnum,
Right.
all right? And it was published in 1897, so like it was written in 64, but started to be circulated through Barnby's publication in 1897 and kind of became the accepted version
Mhm.
of For All the Saints.
And can I just say that
Mhm.
it was mostly used at that time for funerals, and it was a
That's
it was
right,
a great
yeah.
processional hymn, and it was used for funerals, and it had that was most of its usage until a little bit later with World War I, and then after that, unfortunately, there were so many funerals that it became a little bit it became more well known. But I've jumped ahead.
And by the time we get to World War I,
Yeah,
it's
it's
got a
already
new
got-
life.
it's already got
it's sort of a different
The Vaughan
thing.
Williams one. Yeah.
So Sarnum,
Sarum. It's S-A-R-U-M. Sarum.
S-A-U-R?
S-A-R-U-M. Sarum.
Sarum, I have an N in it.
No N. It's just Sarum.
So that's published in 1897. It starts to circulate. It gets popular.
Mhm.
It's published again, same thing, same tune, in 1906 in a pretty distributed volume called the Church Hymnal. Not the English hymnal, which comes later, but the
Mhm.
Church Hymnal. But it gets some circulation, so it gets legs about
Mhm.
the turn of the century, just after the turn of the century, and really becomes the most accepted thing. Now, I say it was distributed in 1906, we were talking earlier, the 1898 Lutheran hymn book at that time, it wasn't in there, because it didn't
Have its life
probably
yet.
it probably had a life in England,
Mhm.
but I don't think it had made it over here
Mhm.
yet. So, we didn't even have it then,
Mhm.
you know, so, it came later for us. So, what I thought we could do is maybe have you sing Barnby's,
Barnby's.
Barnby's version.
Well, we'll let you decide, but there's a reason I think.
Well,
that we
let's
have
just
a new
say
one.
that the story doesn't end with
No,
Barnby.
it doesn't.
All right.
Absolutely.
So we just had this big that we know today,
Mhm.
but before today we had this from Mr. Barnby.
For all the saints who from their labors rest, put they my feet before the world confess. Thy name, O Jesus, be forever blessed. Alleluia, alleluia.
I find that very surprising.
I know. It doesn't feel at all like the one that we know.
That was just such a surprise, and I have to tell you, I am playing that out of Service Book and Hymnal.
Ah.
So, you know, Service Book and Hymnal, when was it? It was
Early part of the 20th
yeah, I
century.
can tell you. This is, I should know that date. 1958.
Oh, okay, so middle century. Wow.
The day, wasn't that,
The day that he
that's Vaughan
died.
Williams' death day?
Yeah.
But
Oh my gosh.
but we're progressing too fast. Let's back up again. We're not there yet.
No, we're not.
All right, so 1958, the Lutheran, you know, now, I mean, 50 years of history have gone by.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in our Lutheran book, and it's in lots of hymn books all over the world by this time. You know,
Is
so
the other version in there too?
if you turn back,
Oh, okay,
they're both listed as 144.
okay.
So, but you know, I grew up in the 70s, and we didn't never use this version that I can recall. Now I'm not going to say we never used it.
I was citing,
you know.
I mean, I've never
Yeah.
sung that
So
before.
if we back up a page, then we have the version that you sang
Yeah.
previously.
Mhm.
You know, but there was a journey. There was another version that came between.
I know.
All right, so we're in 1906. You know, we had this version you just sang,
Mhm.
and there's a guy named Charles Stanford, who was also a prominent musician and college professor in London, and he wrote a version too. He was kind of in the progressive line of thought that was moving away from the romantic period of music.
A Victorian
Yeah.
style of hymnody and stuff.
And more towards the pomp and circumstance that we were speaking of. And so he was interested in matching what he thought was better tunes to older text. So this is a great text. So he took it and he came up with this.
Which is very surprising.
Yeah, once again, very surprising.
Uh-huh.
All right, so here is Mr. Stanford's version. Oops.
I love that melody. When in our music. That's it.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So yeah, we know that now, and we're going to talk about this hymn next week. This piece of music that I just played that used to be for all the saints.
So here's the thing. Mr. Stanford was Ralph Vaughan Williams' teacher. And so I believe that some of Mr. Stanford's ideas and music rubbed off
I'm pretty sure.
on Ralph Vaughan Williams. And
But who's Vaughan Williams? For
well,
those of us who don't know.
Well, Vaughan Williams is, I've always considered him to be a pretty contemporary, very English composer. And he's written a lot of different things.
He's a major composer.
Yeah,
When
major,
you think
major.
of like Mozart.
Yeah.
You know,
He's a major
he's like a
20th
major
century English composer. And he was, just a little background with him, you know, he lived in that first part of the 20th century, and he died in 1958, which was interesting, is what we were talking about. And he had this passion for searching out folk music in England. And I respect that because it happens to be a love of mine as well. And I think that has given his music that personal feel, all in the things that he writes.
Yeah, I understand what he did was we talked in one of the opuses about how some of the spirituals were acquired here in America, that people went out, musicians went out and went to towns and rural areas and had people sing and share these songs, and then they notated it as best they could.
That's right.
And this is what he did in England. And not just England, but all the Wales and all the British Isles.
Yeah, and like I said, it always makes the music more personal.
So I think of him as being a little bit nationalistic,
I am most definitely.
You know, he was great friends for the musicians out there, great friends with Gustav Holst. And when I have been exposed to Vaughan Williams and Holst, sometimes I forget which one's which because they're almost like interchangeable in a way. They had a great friendship and must have shared an awful lot of ideas. They both had that love of the folk
and melodies.
Yeah, melodies.
Very beautiful, but that comes from the folk music, I do believe.
Right.
Yeah. So Ralph Vaughan Williams was probably hired to help build this hymn.
Well, he was appointed the music editor.
Music editor
of the English.
For the English,
hymnal,
the Anglican hymnal, and he wasn't very fond of the stuff that was in there, and he said it's time to write some new melodies to some of these things. You have a quote.
Oh my gosh,
This is a great
so
quote
funny.
from him.
So, of course, For All the Saints is going to be continued in this hymn book.
And I also want to say, probably because it is a hymn for All Saints' Day, and I believe that just in utilitarian thinking, churches need a hymn for All Saints' Day. It has a life above that, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why it was considered for improvement.
Yeah, and yes, definitely important because you need to match up the church year with appropriate text.
Exactly.
And so, but so Stanford's hymn that I just played, and we know is a different thing. You know, that to me that would have been perfectly fine. It's all those things,
It's
regal,
much more like
joyful, full
yeah.
of strength. It's all those
Majestic.
things. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's even in the same key.
Yeah.
You know, and it has the same vocal range, really.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of does the same thing. And we also talked about it. You know, Vaughan Williams. It starts on, you know, like it starts on a rest. You know, so
yeah. The
which
voice
is different.
comes in on the second
well,
beat.
and we'll kind of share that in a minute here, but anyway, but Stanford's version was already published and copyrighted. And so even though it was virtually in the same time period, right there in that 1906, 7, 8 range, he couldn't use that to, I have a feeling he probably would have.
Oh, I think
had
so.
it been available and not been
Yeah.
published 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
So he wrote another tune,
He did.
and we think in a way, they're very similar.
They're
tunes.
very similar, very
Yeah.
similar, yeah. And probably thought of at this time as being very modern compared to what we heard from
Yeah.
Barnaby, you know, which is very, you know,
I saw it called Safe.
Yeah.
It was a safe hymn.
That's right.
It
It's
didn't,
because they didn't think congregations
you know,
could sing anything.
it was kind of stepwise
Yeah.
and not too complex.
The
You know,
congregation had to be able to sing.
intervals were not very, you know, challenging,
no.
I guess. You know, it had a little bit of the romantic harmonies to it. You know, if you're a fan of that, you probably like it.
Barnaby's.
You know? Yeah, Barnaby's did, the one that we first had popularity.
Well, it's pretty normal and
Yeah.
stuff you hear a lot.
Yeah.
And the cadences, the endings are pretty much what
But it
you
doesn't
would
make the
expect.
text real memorable, does it?
No.
I mean, you know, now the one you sang originally, which is Vaughan Williams, that's the one he wrote. That's the one we know today. Could have had Stanford's, but as history history was good to us because we still have his, just with another great set of words.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about that next week, as I said. But
But with this-
the merging of the text here with Vaughan Williams.
I'm a
melody.
text person, as you know, but I believe that the music, that the way Vaughan Williams wrote this music to go with this text is the thing that makes it so thrilling. I appreciate the words, but
Yeah.
I have sung, and this is called Sine Nomine, which is without name. And it goes back to the thing in Ecclesiastes, really, it says, there are some who have no memorial, who have perished as though they had not lived. They have become as though they had not been born, and so have their children after them. And it's from Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
And
So ingenious. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have sung it, the arrangement, probably it's a Fred Waring arrangement of Sine Nomine, and I started as a very young choral singer, and it has always been close to my heart just because he does take those verses, and he did it in the hymnal as well, but he takes, some of them are unison, and the unison gives it the power. And then there are some of the verses that are harmonized, and it shows off the beauty of the words.
Yeah, I think, hopefully I have this right, but as we said, there was 11 stanzas to work with. And Von Williams, sometimes in the hymn book, you'll notice that there's an extra line over top of the hymn. So there's what the organist plays, and then there's this vocal line up above, and that's when they have a unison, what they consider a unison part. They want everybody singing,
the same
don't
thing.
harmonize.
Right.
And so when you sing everybody on the same pitch, what we call unison, that, like you said, it gives it power. So the power verses are the ones that are saintly, are heavenly saints.
Yeah.
And so the
right.
church militant ones are more
harmonized.
sensitive. They're the ones down here for our personal, what's going on personally with our saints around us here on earth. So,
But it's also, I just thought of the fact that it's harmonized in 4 parts kind of represents the diversity of everyone on earth as well. I didn't think about that, but that.
yeah, and I'm
could.
hoping that Pastor will be able to find to include the 1906 version, which I actually played off of that right here when you sang it earlier. It's set up, and you can't see it up here, but it has that single line over top what the organist is playing. And then over here on page 2 are the verses that are for, it says the communion of saints.
Yes.
And then it's for, and it's not
That's
written
cool.
as an organ per se. It almost looks like it was intended for a cappella part
And
singing.
I have sung it that way. That's the way the arrangements work.
Yeah, and it's written like you would normally see a hymn with parts, and the words are in the middle, you know. And so that 1906 version of Von Williams
It's just the
was
music.
laid out that way, very well
The music
thought out.
is just so beautiful, and as I said before, you sing that harmony on those verses, and then it goes into the last verse, and I believe it might go back to unison, but there is a descant. A descant means it's just a part that's
But
higher.
I don't, Von Williams probably didn't write the descant.
I don't know.
He may have, I don't know.
But man, I tell you, that makes that last verse soar, and that's the one about heaven and earth and all that
Where's
stuff.
your, can I have your copy of it? I'll show, this right here, the Von Williams copy, yeah. So this is, the first page over here, there's 2 pages, so my first page really demonstrates why it feels like a march.
Oh,
And you know, it's used for procession many times, and very English, pomp and circumstance, very processional-like piece, and a lot of what drives it is no matter what the right hand is doing, the left hand's doing this, what we call a walking bass. So there's a beat, you know, a different, so even if there's a half note, you know, 2 beats up here in my right hand, I'm gonna still play through that down here. So,
yeah, let's hear
you know,
that.
here's the bass just by itself. So it just keeps walking like that. And then with his melody on top of it, and again, this would have been sung in unison. And can I say that bass is on beat 1. So it's confusing to the congregation sometimes because it doesn't start, you know, on the first beat. It starts on beat 2.
But
and
you play it really loudly.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's because you wanted to emphasize the word saints. So,
That's correct.
So 1 for all the saints. So saints is on beat 1 in the next measure.
That's right.
So here's that bass note, and then the unison singing over the top with this marching bass. It keeps on going like that, and the bass never comes to rest until the last whole note. But the Communion of Saints verses over here on the second page it still has the chord arrest in the beginning and a bass note, but then look what happens. We don't have the walking bass now.
No.
A little more sensitive. So so
Yeah.
interesting that it's set up like that, and so it's fun for us to maybe, everybody's a musician out there, we just sing it because we know we love it, and we don't know why we love it, but for those who like to sort of delve into what makes it tick, when you sing it next time, you can sort of just go.
Think about
you
those
can think
things.
about the things that we're talking about here.
And I always believe that, most of the time, I will say always for me, but the more you understand about the music, the more enjoyment you get out of it. So those little insights, and even just the little bit of research that we've done on these guys and how it evolved,
it brings it to new life for me.
It brings it to new life for me as well. Absolutely.
It does. So, it's a great text from Mr. Howe, and it evolved and was matched with a great melody with Von Williams, and had some other adventures in between, so when it's all said and done, we've ended up with a lasting, powerful hymn that kind of shows our great heritage.
Yeah.
Just to kind of end the chat, we were talking a little bit about Von Williams. You could have a dissertation on him. He's one of the big ones.
Right.
But what we did learn about him was he was not. He was an atheist.
Agnostic.
In his earlier years, and then after World War I and some other life events, just living life, he really was more what we call an agnostic.
Yes.
He sort of left room for anything.
Questioning.
And so it's interesting because he wrote Christian hymns and knew how to write Christian hymns, and when he wrote this, he wasn't known yet. He wasn't a big deal yet. But when you're a big deal composer, you write in any genre, and he did. And you write quality in every genre, and you know how to do every genre. So he certainly did that. But I said to Barbara earlier, I said I have hope for him, because he did have this quote, if I can find it, and we'll kind of end the chat on this. It says, I guess he was thinking about what happens after he leaves the earth. He says, "In the next world, I shall not be doing music, with all its strivings and its disappointments. I shall be being it. I shall be being it."
Music, yeah.
So I guess if he could say what will happen to him in the afterlife, he wants to be doing music. He wants to be music. But he talks about in the next world. So
right. So there is.
To me, I think
Yeah.
he is a deep thinker, and
Absolutely.
he found his way, and I think maybe we can maybe have some hope for him.
Well, and as we talked about that other little talk that we heard, and a musician who is that good at creating music in whatever the genre, and being able to take those words and put music to them that is meaningful, it transcends all that other stuff, and it can become something that is very meaningful and spiritual in its mere beauty.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be attached to a religion or to whatever God it is.
Well, and for the time that he spent doing music like this, he gave it his all, and
yes, he did, and he left his legacy is great.
He certainly, he. Well, I didn't share that quote, did I? About Mr. Barnaby.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, we should have talked about that one.
Yeah, we
did talk about the fact that he didn't.
Yeah.
Think that, he was a good musician, and he wanted church music to also have that high quality, which we all share. So.
Yeah. So he wanted it to be right.
Yeah.
He spent time with religious works from time to time, and
wanted it to be,
took them seriously, and wanted them to be the best.
Worthy.
Yeah, and he didn't particularly care for things that he didn't think were worthy.
Right.
And wasn't.
Which,
Yeah, exactly.
He's an artist.
Yeah.
It happens.
So we'll leave it at that, but we're looking forward to coming back next week
Mhm.
and talking about Charles Stanford, Von Williams' teacher,
Right.
who wrote the first For All the Saints to the tune that we now know as When in Our Music God is Glorified. And we'll kind of find out the rest
More
of the
about that,
story
the
on
rest
that.
of the story.
So
Very
we'll
good.
see you next time on the Music Chat.
Bye.